Welcome back to West Fox. It's been a long time, but I am your host, Joel, joined by
Shepard. Nice to see everybody again. It's been a long time.
It has been a couple years. I've done some small stuff on the channel, pretty much nothing essentially, but we are back. New location, much has changed in our lives. All good things, but we're back. And so we're enjoying some cigars. My brother's visiting me out from out of town, and we're enjoying some cigars. And he had brought up a good little question, which was, which one's better, Wrath of Khan or Empire Strikes Back? And it's a complicated one because it's two franchises that I know there's the people out there who are either Star Wars or Star Trek people, and I grew them both. We grew up in both. I think all three of us, and the other brother as well, who's not here today, unfortunately, we'd all agree that we grew up with Star Wars. Even our dad, I think, would be in the same category.
Yes.
That we
he showed us them both.
Yeah, he loves Star Trek, loves Star Wars. So we don't really have a bias in that sense of do we love one far more than the other. Both have their merits, both have their strong parts, both have their weak parts. But the tricky thing for us, we were kind of talking about off camera, and then I said, let's do this on camera. Let's talk about it because it's a great one. And part of where I saw was a little bit of apples and oranges element to it, and then I'll let Christopher go into his thoughts, which is it's almost like I said, apples and oranges, because you have a middle movie of a franchise that's very epic, giant stakes on the story. It's the Galactic Empire versus the Rebels. And then you have Wrath of Khan, which is a very small story inside of character-driven. It's about Kirk, his crewmates, their development of friendship, and his aging out over the last decades of time through his colleagues, and obviously the death of Spock towards the end of it, but also his death of his son. I mean, it is a brutal story. Actually, does his son die?
His son dies in Search for Spock, so it's technically the next movie. But but he gets to know he has a son.
Yeah, obviously. He really kind of realizes it. So I misspoke there. It's been a little while. I'll be honest, it's been a little while since I've seen.
And at the end, I think by the end of Wrath of Khan, though, there is a reconciliation between him and David.
That's right.
So there actually is a relationship that can be banked on for the next movie.
One. But the stories are both really tight. And we both agree on one issue that always struck us as a big mistake on Kirk's part, which he does acknowledge. How'd you phrase it? He says...
because I think he says to... gosh, I can't remember her name, but Kirstie Alley's character saying,
Saavik.
You keep quoting regulations, and I think he does make a quote I was caught with my bridges down or something of that effect. Of going agreeing that was a stupid decision to just keep them on yellow alert and not raise the shields.
Yeah, that to me is probably the in that movie that's always been to me probably the biggest stickler. From a meta perspective mistake, from the writing side, just because, like I was telling, we were talking before, that's why I wanted to bring it on here, which is raising the shields is not like a Cold War escalational part where you arm your nuclear missiles, we arm our nuclear missiles. You put in launch codes, we put in launch codes. Right. The Enterprise raising her shields has no detriment to the situation. It's a no-loss scenario for the ship, because the worst thing that's going to happen is the communications from the Reliant comes back online. They're like, oh, no, we're good. We're buddies.
We're Federation officers. Good. We're totally
Nothing's
cool.
wrong here. And if it isn't, well, your shields are up, and then the whole start of the movie.
Yep.
And I think there's some ways they could have worked around it, from everything from I think they were in a training run. They could say that they were doing some maintenance on the shield, so they're not technically ready to go. Or even if you still if you want that onus to still be on Kirk, that he still makes a mistake, I just feel like there was probably a better way to make the mistake versus him just kind of being stupid. I mean, really, it's a stupid move. We felt like a really stupid move.
I think what's more so, it's not even stupid. I think it's it's very out of character for Kirk. Because as much as, he's saying, like, I know the regulations and keep on quoting the regulations, you know him from the original series that he protects his people, and sometimes regulations might fall to the side if that's the case. Like, that's kind of the clear difference between him in a lot of ways and Picard. As kind of like, that difference as them as captains, like that's kind of like like Kirk
plus their time frame too.
Plus their time frame and what they're going through. Obviously, first off, too, Kirk is during a time frame of disputes, wars.
Well, and it's a
far
little
more
bit, and I think people would describe the Federation.
Western.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the Wild West.
Yeah, swashbuckler, pirating, or the
versus
Old West.
like a modern. Picard was the modern
diplomat.
Yeah, and also if you said which is my favorite captain,
Kirk.
I might say Picard, only because I feel like now that's because Picard probably had more seasons of development through the story. But like on a one-off shot, like probably Kirk. But from probably from the totality of the shows, which probably skews it for me, it does become Picard. But the difference too is Picard as a captain in the Next Generation was kind of a paragon character where he didn't really grow a ton. Like there's little pieces, but he was already a really good captain. Like Picard was a solid individual.
If anything, you had him going from very rigid to becoming a little bit less in some senses throughout the series, and that's also, I think, because of him as an actor, his how he changed. Because I think
and that's always hard to really predict in that space.
Yeah, because he clearly the Patrick Stewart of season 1 of TNG would not be the guy who went on Family Guy.
Oh,
right. American Dad and stuff like that, where clearly there was a change of him actually enjoying the craft and maybe falling into some stuff that I think somewhat plays through in his character a bit more as
well. And I would pull up. I would probably compare it to, which I think is right up there with Wrath of Khan in the sense of Star Trek movies is First Contact, where he has his own kind of demons with the Borg, similar to. We were talking about the future Kirk's demons with the Klingons, that both took away something really precious to them, which both have a huge amount of value. Which one's worth more? That's perspective on that one, because somewhat the Borg stole Picard's identity, and then the Klingons
and used him against the Federation.
Yeah,
so there's guilt. There's both loss and guilt.
Yeah, there's a lot there for both characters when it comes to that, like anger and rage when it comes to certain levels of enemy.
Yeah. Although they made Picard too much of an action hero for the movies, in general, I don't think he's the same captain. I really don't think he's exactly the same captain.
Never thought that way. I could see it. What you're saying.
I think people like Critical Drinker or Mahler mentioned it, but the more I think about it, I think it is kind of true that
Kirk was definitely more the action guy in the show.
Yes,
but he was also what, late 20s?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Versus Picard was probably late 30s. I don't know.
Yeah, he's actually because I'm trying to remember.
Early 40s. I mean, it's always hard when someone's bald, and nothing gets to that, but like it does throw off your perspective of age.
Yeah.
And it's always funny when you see old shows when characters are our age and they look like my grandparents.
Yeah.
And you're like the most, I mean, it's a bit of an extreme example, but like Doc Brown in Back to the Future.
Yeah, right.
He was like 42 years old. Like, that's the reason he hasn't aged. Like, when you see him and you're like,
well, it's the same white hair and kind of older face.
He looks exactly the same. And you're like, oh, because he stopped aging at like, he ran up to frickin' 42 to 60 and then he never aged past that look. But yeah, like I said, the tricky thing for me on which one's better is just because they're so both brilliantly good, but so
vastly different.
So different in what they're giving you. I would happily watch either one anytime. Yes. If I was to it's so hard picking one. If someone said you had to pick one, gun to your head type thing, I'd probably.
I'll tell you my choice.
Go ahead,
and I'll give you my reasoning. I think with everything being, I think I would say at a very enjoyment level equal, I would say that I would give it to Wrath of Khan because in one way it's a finished story in the one movie.
Yeah.
Empire Strike Back, obviously you kind of need to know what happens next.
Right. And that is the trick too, because
which is also what makes it so good.
Right.
In its own aspect. But and that's hard too, because at the same time, on a completely different thing, Two Towers is my favorite. But in its own way, that still has like an encapsulated ending, even though there's more.
But see, I'm one of those weird ones too, where, to be honest, Return of the Jedi is my favorite of the Star Wars.
I think Return of the Jedi is my favorite.
I mean, it has its flaws. I mean, you know,
I think it has more flaws than any of the movies of the other two.
I think the Ewoks are generally considered the biggest flaw in that movie, which I think if they had, I don't know if it's true, but I'd heard at one point the idea had been actually they'd be on like essentially, I don't know if there was a name.
Kashyyyk,
yeah,
the Wookiee homeworld.
And I think that would have dramatically...
Which is why they did it in Revenge of the Sith.
Right. I think that would have dramatically changed our opinions of the whole Wookiees. They have been like...
It would have been a race that you could see defeating the Stormtroopers instead of I throw rocks at you.
Cute teddy bears. Yeah. I think the idea they've been bowcasters and stuff.
Cute teddy bears until they did the
the
CGI eyes.
They will eat you. Yes.
Those CGI eyes are terrifying in the remade ones.
Do they have CGI eyes?
Yeah, they do. No, because the original ones, it's like teddy bear, like the typical teddy bear eyes.
Right.
Which I know there's some people who find that terrifying. My fiance does. But the CGI version of it,
scary.
like when you see Wicket, it's like because they got like you can see like the veins in there sometimes, like the red veins. It's like they look almost bloodshot. It's creepy. But
I kind of avoid all the remakes with this.
I need to find all the originals and get maybe not the originals because I think the original like Star Wars then like has Jabba as still the guy. It doesn't have him as the worm that we're all used to. I think the original theatrical for that one, or like the first version. I could be wrong.
No, you're wrong.
Okay.
The original theatrical. You're thinking because they added all. What you're thinking about is the digital when they did the digital remake and they put a guy character inside of a stand-in, and you're thinking the behind the scenes part of that one. No, there was always
okay.
Yeah, you're thinking about the prequels now, and that's just because you're younger, and so like when the prequels came out. Well,
yeah,
sorry.
When the Phantom Menace came out in 99, so I was 7.
Yeah, when the special editions came out, that's when they started showing all the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's when the remakes started coming out. So you were like just a little kid. Nothing wrong with that. But that's where you're a little kid, so you're like probably mixing and...
That might be what it is, yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, all the movies are great. Like I said, now, you know, obviously the tonal differences of the Star Wars original trilogy is pretty much the same in the sense of general tone.
Yes.
Versus the trilogy in the Star Trek one, which is Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, and Voyage Home, is vastly different. Obviously, Voyage Home is the biggest total difference on that, which trends more towards a comedy, which I still really enjoy.
Hugely enjoy for
but I think
what it is.
So and I think that's again the big difference of the Star Trek movies, especially those ones, which they are obviously some action, sci-fi, obviously more hard sci-fi, obviously, but those three movies are purely not purely, but massively character driven versus the Star Wars ones, which are characters, but there's
and you have
stakes. The stakes are so much different.
And you technically have.
Oh, sorry, the Voyage Home has some pretty high stakes.
It does have some high stakes.
That one does have like destruction of Earth, but no, we're not talking galaxy stakes. We're talking destruction of Earth and possibly other.
Which obviously for the Star Trek universe is
pretty massive.
It's massive. You know, like you destroy the Earth, the Federation's gone,
or at least severely damaged.
Yeah, I'd say crippled to a
possibly unfunctioning in the future degree for sure.
Yeah.
Because you had all the delegates there, and then everyone was stuck there. So yeah, it would have been a massive blow to the Federation.
Yeah, it'd be like saying like getting rid of, Washington D.C. being destroyed. It's like, yeah, okay, is America still here? Of course, but
yeah,
your primary functioning government is obliterated overnight. There's going to be some problems,
right? Well, and then all your delegates.
There's going to be some issues.
Well, then you have to issue.
And then foreign in that case. Like what
Klingons
or Romulans at that point, of being like, well, this is a good time to your weekend.
Yeah,
Let's go.
I don't know. That would have to be that would be a really complicated breakdown of like what the repercussions of that would be, because it would come down to like, okay, we know there's the giant mushroom star base there, and a bunch of how many ships were there. Like, is there a ability to reconcile that? But yeah.
But to go back then, so we've named one of our primary, like, sticks out to us. What would you say is something that sticks out to you for Empire Strikes Back?
Is it a mistake?
As a mistake that's like, ooh, that's a clear, that makes something happen. And I want to preface this to everyone watching then too, that I don't think either of us have plot holes anywhere in this. I don't think that it...
Yeah, we're not talking like... We're not looking for like, oh, a piece of scenery's moved or a micro plot hole or something like that.
And I would say that I think the issues we... Like so far, even with Wrath of Khan, I would not call that in any way a plot hole, but it definitely is a...
It's a choice that we don't love inside the story.
And like I think it... Because that choice does facilitate the rest of the movie. It facilitates the fact that Spock has to die. Well, because the ship gets damaged enough that they can't.
Massively, yeah. I mean, just massively damaged.
So it does. At the same time, it creates huge stakes that then have such a great emotional payoff because of it, and that's why I wish it would have been stronger. So you don't have that moment of,
yeah.
It's a bummer that Kirk doesn't act the way he should.
I don't know if. I mean, I don't think I have a writing quirk of that nature inside of Empire Strikes Back.
I'm trying to think. I'm.
I don't feel like there's one that stand out to me in that same way. They go, because they start off the thing.
So you got Hoth, you got that kind of stuff on there. That makes total sense. If there was something, I think it might have to do with Bespin. And I think maybe how certain things happen there.
Yeah. I feel like that's pretty tight.
Or the possible.
Yeah, like I said, there's nothing stark. Like I said, you probably could dig for something, and you're like, what are the biggest mistakes in the return in the
Empire Strikes Back? Yeah, I'd have to.
But there's, like I said,
I watched both of them so much, and yet I am having a harder time.
Because even with Wrath of Khan, that is the one.
That's the one.
That's the only one where it's just like, I wish they hadn't. I wish Kirk should have raised the shield, or should have been a reason why he couldn't raise the shields, or delayed, or. Now that trick. This is where you have to be careful though, because in writing, and it's one of my biggest critiques of remakes or adaptations is usually they'll tweak something that has big implications later on. Mm-hmm. My favorite example to use is in Aladdin, in the animated movie. Jafar disguises himself as an old man so that when Aladdin sees him later on as Jafar, he doesn't realize he's the one that tricked him to go into the Cave of Wonders.
Yeah.
In the live action, Jafar stays in his same look, which was a weird choice because you would think as an actor you want to do this fun little quirky thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so later on, when Aladdin sees Jafar, he just kind of ignores it, I feel like, in the story. And he doesn't really acknowledge, oh, this guy's not a good guy from the start, like versus being like be tricked by him. You wouldn't want to use the codes, like, because you wouldn't want Khan to know the code system to lower the shields, because that's the trick that Kirk uses with his knowledge later on. Because that's the whole concept later on when Spock says he thinks very two-dimensionally, which is pretty much inexperience.
Yes.
And so you wouldn't want to bring that in earlier because that's like the cheat that Kirk uses to win in the end. So you wouldn't want to really reveal the cheat earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
I think the mistake has to be on Kirk's side still, where there was something he was doing that he probably shouldn't have done, but it's just not ignoring the fact there was a ship coming at him. Because I think didn't they raise?
They go to yellow alert, which I think.
But didn't they when they go like, they're locking, they're warming their face, like they lock their phasers on. They couldn't do it on fast enough. But I was like,
I think if the scene goes, they go. Because they're like, okay, they still haven't done anything, and then I think it cuts to Khan and the Reliant, and he's like target target them, and then I think it cuts back, and I think Spock's just on like
They're locking on.
they're locking on phasers, and then it's evasive maneuvers and ray shields, and that's why then the Enterprise does the tilt off to the right and then gets blasted across the deep side. So it's a and it's like, and I think like you said, or maybe if they wouldn't have had so many oddities to getting to that point, it might seem more make sense for Kirk to be like, I don't need the ray shields, but you're coming to Regular One. You haven't had contact with them.
You know what they should have used, actually?
You know the Reliant was the one coming there from the message from Carol.
No, you know what they should have used? Maybe. I'd have to... it's been a while since I've watched it. But what they probably should have used was Sulu. No, Chekhov.
Yes. Yes. That would have made sense.
Now, see...
It might have muddled up.
That might be...
That actually brings the other one that I'd say
that
is the oddity.
might be the strategy if I was to, like, said, hindsight, right? But Chekhov might have been the strategy, because what I don't recall...
He's already on Regular One at that point.
No, he was on the ship.
Well, yeah, but he's at that point he was already on because he and the captain Tyrell are in the little compartment in Regular One at that point.
When they attack the ship?
Yeah, because then when they finally get to the base, they find them inside the crates. So they would have already been there.
Oh, it's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you couldn't replace that one. Darn it.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, if there was but I feel like that would have been the writing thing I would have tried to figure out.
I'd have to like I said, it's been a while since I watched it.
Because I will say, thinking of that does bring the only other thing that is a bit convenient, and that's the ear and the worm, the earworm things.
Right, the little creature.
That then Chekhov is able to survive. It's a little odd.
Well, I'm okay with the reason I'm okay with it is because literally the reason is it's a bit of a trope, but it's the classic.
I'm able to defeat it.
No, well, yes, but more along the lines of what you're commanding me to do goes against
so much of who I am that I'm fighting it.
A deep ingrained nature. You're not just telling me to kill somebody or betray.
You're not just telling me to kill my captain. You're telling me to kill
my friend. And so
of 30 plus years.
And again, that's where that whole, like I said, the dynamics of Wrath of Khan with having the crew later on. That's why, for me, the remake of Wrath of Khan, which is Into Darkness,
a shallow version of everything.
Fails with that scene with the Kirk switcheroo, mostly because first Kirk and Spock's relationship is kind of unpleasant from the whole movie, but also too, you don't have the decades of friendship built into it. Yes. Plus, you have the classic kicking in the warp core to fix it versus what Spock was doing with
simple
Enterprise,
fixing.
which is like essentially pulling out the nuclear reactor and realigning it, which is obviously not as spectacle-y as this giant warp core. It's the size of a skyscraper in the building.
Even though that looks so stupid anyway, it's like I would say even if I put those two scenes together, like just with anything else, the Spock one's far more compelling to me than seeing him holding on a barn swinging to kick it back into place. It's like, whatever.
And it goes against, like I said, it's almost more
hit it with a hammer and it fixes it.
Yeah, it's almost more a Star Wars. It's almost more a Star Wars thing where you'd be like, just hit the ship and it starts working.
Yeah.
Versus the Star Trek thing where like
things actually have mechanics and engineering and
Star Trek's
science.
Very precision. The whole like the science behind it, even if it's sci-fi science, it's very much about like perfection, micro formulas, things that are accurate to the billionth of a degree. And when you're in like, we're just gonna kick it, it'll realign, and you're like, no.
Well, and of course too, I think the biggest difference is at the end of Wrath of Khan, Spock's dead. There isn't chance of revival. I mean,
right? Because
technically, I think in the theatrical version they don't even have the scene of the pod on the planet. They did that later.
Correct. That is correct.
Because then they were later like, oh, maybe we'll bring him back. Whereas obviously Into Darkness, we already knew that
that's true.
The Tribble blood was going to be able to. The Khan's blood was already going to bring back the dead. So they already
Right.
gave him how he's going to come back. So it's like,
Right.
so you even stole the emotional payoff of the original one. That's like, holy crap, Spock's dead.
Right.
Like, and like you said, it's like if you were a fan of obviously the movies, but the original series, then from before that, you're like, Spock's dead.
And that might be
And
an
this one,
argument
it's like,
for why Wrath of Khan's better. That would probably be a strong argument for why the original theatrical release of strong Wrath of Khan is better, is because not only do they kill Spock, like his sacrifice, they do a couple good things. First, his sacrifice is real,
yes,
and they don't undo it right away.
Yes.
And even the way they undo it is
through
painful.
loss still.
Painful
He
for
loses
Spock.
his son. Well, like
Well,
Spock.
no, but I mean, like
yeah,
for Spock's
for
painful.
Spock is
Painful. But you have the element of, like, as an audience member, if you watch that, I mean, I watched that movie when I was so young, so I can't even remember what my thoughts were on that, to be honest, in the sense of like, oh, he died. I don't know if it'd be the same impact if I like watched it, as a younger adult. But you have,
Yeah.
not only they kill Spock, they launch him. Like it is.
Yeah.
I mean, that is.
It's a finality to it.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a great scene. I mean, that's
they have the Amazing Grace playing. Like, it is not played as
Spectacular.
any way that it's like, oh, he's coming back. It's played as, this is the triumphant end and sacrifice of Spock
yeah. He
for the crew of the
sacrifices-
Enterprise,
Right.
And his best friend James T. Kirk. I'm like, that is how it's played.
and that's where again, the older Star Trek was so good in that stuff when they had the moral quandaries, which actually is that moral quandary is the backbone of that trilogy, which is the sacrifice of one for the many or many for the one.
Yes.
And that is the whole backbone of that 3-movie trilogy, because Spock looks at it from a strictly logical perspective, which is, I'm willing to sacrifice myself for the greater good of the crew. And then the crew comes back around and says, we're willing to sacrifice essentially
Everything for our
for our,
friend,
for the one.
Yeah.
And that was and both are valid. Like, it's one of those ones where, again, it is really, really great because both perspectives are done in a valid way where you're not like, oh, well, because it's one of the things that irks me. I'll use an example. It was the, it was not John Wick. It's the show, Jack Ryan. Jack Ryan, the remake. It has the actor from The Office.
Yeah. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I can't.
Someone knows what we're talking about. But he plays the character, and his trauma. I remember when they revealed why he has the trauma in the show. I stood up and clapped in my house, because the reason he has the trauma is because he did get his colleagues killed. And the reason is because in the story, spoilers, by the way, so you don't jump ahead like a minute. In the story, he has trauma because he invited a child onto the helicopter that then suicide bombed, grenaded the helicopter, which got all the people on the helicopter killed. It got him injured. And in the show, the kid had been around him for weeks or months, and just like, he was just this cute little kid that was interacting with the troops, and they're just like, they're evacuating the group of people, and the kid's like, please save me too. And like, either choice he had made, he would have regrets.
Yes.
Like,
There would be some
he has the
kind of-
regrets of that, the unknown regret of like, oh, I could have saved that kid.
Yep.
So
And now the no regret that's saving him.
that was why that one I love so much, because so many times in the stories they'll have a character that has like regrets from a situation. They're like, oh, if I had been there, I could have saved him, or in this stuff. And you're like, no, you couldn't have, man. You could not have saved your buddy. You could not have saved the group. You had no power inside the situation. But in this one, he had full agency, and he made the wrong choice. Now, he didn't know that was the wrong choice until he had to made the wrong choice, because he had to make the other choice. He would have thought that was the wrong choice as well.
Right.
So that's why that's so great. And so that's why it's so rare these days when they actually put characters, again, that's why I use it, is put characters in the spaces where
No-win scenarios.
Yeah, no-win scenarios, right? Kobayashi Maru. You give them a choice. And again, talk about foreshadowing. Another great element of that one, Wrath of Khan, which is the Kobayashi Maru talking about, I don't like situations I can't win.
Yeah.
And that's the whole story, because
I don't believe in a no-win scenario.
and then he's forced into one with Spock, where he's like, I can't save you now, and he literally can't. And yes, through narrative future movies, they do save Spock, but to me, that doesn't take away the greatness of that movie's sacrifice for the characters. It's not a simple undo of like,
Kirk learned, like, understood the impact of that lesson. I think that's what it. And as much as I would say, I absolutely detest Star Trek Generations for so much that it does with Kirk. In a way, it does pay that off. In that sense, because then he's the one to defeat the ribbon.
yeah, my only
Or to kind of get that, but I think there's so much else wrong with that. But actually, to go back on your point of, you actually made a good point where you're saying like the heart, the storyline of, the good of the many or the good of the many for the one. Actually, I think in some ways does follow through, not for 5, but for Undiscovered Country, because at that point it's Kirk pretty much almost having to sacrifice his detest of the Klingons for the betterment of all of the Federation and humanity
Right.
to find peace.
yeah, that's a good point.
So that
It's been so long since I watched that one.
Yeah.
I just know it from the tangentially, but like,
I've watched it more recently, but when you said that, I was like, actually, that follows in line. 5 does not. 5 loses the plot
yeah,
a lot. But when you said that, I was like, oh, that actually kind of brings it in there. But like I said, I can partially under that understanding give Generations maybe like kind of pays that off. But I hate what they did to Kirk and Generations in general.
yeah.
I think it was an undignified death for him at the same time as I'm like, hey, it kind of helps him. Like he learned his lesson because he's finally the one who has to sacrifice. Like he finally has to be the one to do it. So a new captain doesn't have to go through the no-win scenario in that
Yeah.
sense. But everything else around it is so botched to get there. It's not really worth it.
Yeah, Generations is one of those ones where I don't hate it, but I definitely dislike Kirk's death in that one. I don't like his death in that one, just because, like you said, it feels it's more of a tacked on death versus a death, and there's probably a bit of a element to me that sometimes I'd rather have him go back into the ribbon. Like sometimes there's certain characters you just don't want to see die.
Yeah.
There's certain characters that like,
Give them the...
please, I'd rather have it fade
let
off.
them live on forever.
Fade into the, just you're like, yeah, we know they died, but like when, where, no one really knows.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
I never really liked how they ended him in that one, just because even the scene itself is kind of like one of those ones where you're like, what's he shoots the thing and it falls down the laser and he falls down the cliff with the metal and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just it's more of
And then his final words are, as he's dying, "Oh my," and you're like, okay,
it's more of a villain. Ironically, it's more of a villain death than a hero death.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like the villain would die that way.
Yeah.
Or like a maybe not even a pure villain, but like a anti-hero type villain death, where they learn their lesson and they die after learning their lesson.
Yeah, and it's like, well, that's not what Kirk needs to really go through. So to get back to it, if maybe I would say on one thing that I can definitely say for sure is I would say that Wrath of Khan has, I would say in general, the Star Trek series of movies have far better dialogue than the Star Wars movies. Even though I think...
Yeah, and that's just the nature of what they are.
Yeah, but because, it's no secret to anyone that George Lucas's dialogue, if left unfettered, is
Sand.
absolute crap.
The sand is scratchy.
The sand, or I always run into the interview where it's a young Mark Hamill talking about this line that they were supposed to have in New Hope, where I think it was Han Solo was supposed to be like, you know, when I find an asteroid, kid, like, I'm dropping you and the old man off. And then, like, Luke has this, like, paragraph of a sentence being like, but if we go over here, then it'll destabilize the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I don't think that's how anybody would ever do anything like da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, and Mark's like, George, no one says this. And it's hilarious because I think,
That's funny.
There's clearly, you know, like, obviously the prequels have it because George did all of it, and he didn't have any no man where you had like Irving Kushner and the other guys in the original trilogy, and his wife who were like, no, that's horrible. Like, no one speaks this way,
Right.
but they're still
Yeah, so I would say that's really again I love them both, but I might, like I said, if I had to pick one, it might be Wrath of Khan.
I think the emotional investment is there, even by our discussions of it. Us saying there, it's far easier. And again,
from a strictly like philosophy / like character element, Wrath of Khan is definitely superior.
Yes.
Again,
I think it's more.
when I say superior, we're talking like
I think it's more intimate.
best of the best. Yeah,
Because it's a more. I think it's a story that everyone truly can understand. Obviously, everyone can understand the basic hero's journey, which
Right.
is what, you know, the Star Wars is, and Luke Skywalker's ultimate journey is. That's not the Star Trek usual writing experience in that sense. It's not the very typical hero's journey of, you know.
well, because Kirk's at the end of his journey. I mean, he's not literally. I mean, it's funny because you look at it and you're like, you know, he's still doing things to this day.
Yeah.
And he's obviously in his older
Now
years.
he's finally got to really go to space.
But I mean, you look at like that was done in the 80s.
Yeah, 80s into the early 90s, I think.
But I mean, like Wrath of Khan was what, 85? I had to look that one up specifically.
83.
Something like that.
Is what? Because they finally brought out TNG in like 91, which was
Oh no, it was earlier than that.
89, 87.
Wrath of Khan. Oh, 82.
Okay, yeah.
82. So I mean, like that. You know, Kirk in the story is kind of older, but you look at like 80s. That's before I'm almost 40. So that was you're like 40 years later, and he's still kicking. You're like, oh, he definitely wasn't really quite.
I was born 10 years after that.
It reminds me of there's as you know, I'm a big anime fan. We both are, but I watch a lot. And there's definitely recommend it if you want to watch one. It's really enjoyable. The Incorrigible Captain Taylor.
Oh, yeah.
Very hilarious. But it's funny because there's a admiral who's like in a wheelchair, retired. He like doesn't really speak much. And I'm like, oh, he must be like 85 years old, maybe a little older. And then in the commercial break cutscenes, when they do like little like graphics between the commercials, it shows all the characters' names and their ages.
Oh, yeah.
But super fast. So I went through one time and I was like, oh, let me see what they say on each one. He's like 60 years old. He's only like 60 years old. And I'm like,
Funny.
okay, he can be retired.
Yeah.
But like, I think they're, and again, this is like sci-fi future type element. You're like, if you said he was 100, I'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense in this space.
Yeah.
60, I'm like, dang, this guy lived a rough life. I know he's a general, but like,
dude, what were you doing for your...
yeah, he's in rough shape. But again, that show was done in the 90s, so it's just kind of funny when you look at back like perspective of age, where you know nowadays people generally do live longer, but also like do better in health older. But even the sense of it when you're like, you know, he's retired. He's not retired. I mean, obviously they put him as captain in the show and in the movies and stuff like that. So he's not really retired, but it is dealing with that age element to it in the story. But it's just also funny when you're like, he really wasn't that old.
You know, you with what you were saying, it did bring in a point that I think is a fair criticism of Empire Strikes Back, where it starts. Empire Strikes Back, the second half is where stormtroopers start becoming very inconsistent in their power and abilities.
In what way?
Their shooting.
Oh,
That's the beginning of their shooting becoming shit and being a joke.
so in Wrath of Khan, Kirk is supposed to be 49. So, yeah, he's still in middle age, but it is funny when you're like, huh. In the modern era, you'd be like, you probably should be like 59.
Yeah.
In the story, compared to what we look at now,
Right.
not back in the day. Again, like I said, it's funny just how when you look at certain people and you're like, oh, because William Shatner actually now is currently he's old. I thought he's 93.
Yeah, he's up there.
He does pretty good for a 93-year-old.
He's enjoying life and enjoying it. So,
But it's just funny when you see that you're like, oh, you're supposed to be 49 in this movie, and
but yeah, I think that actually might be beginnings of some of the weaker points for Empire Strikes Back is that Bespin, because I think there's some misconception, and I know that there's people who've talked about it before, but the Stormtroopers have not always been crap shooters, even in the original trilogy. In A New Hope,
Hope,
they're deadly. They're not deadly when they're letting Han, Luke, and Leia escape the Death Star, because as you find out, they put a tracker on their ship. So they're trying to let them go. So there is a reason for why they're not as deadly aim. Then you get to Empire Strikes Back, the attack on Hoth, they are completely deadly. You get to Bespin, and they start becoming a little bit crap. And then you get to Return of the Jedi, and they are hysterically inaccurate.
You know what? That's probably, again, that's definitely more of a story thing because it's plot armor for the main characters. But you're right, because it is funny, because when Obi-Wan does say, he's like, only a stormtrooper
can have such precise aim, or like whatever it is. And then you're like,
later on, you're like, wow, no one in this universe is a sniper.
Yeah. And then, of course, you have the new Star Trek, or Star Wars, you had Mandalorian that compounded that
we don't talk
horribly.
About that. But, yeah, right.
We're going to make it an in-universe joke that you're crap shooters. It's like, please don't. Please don't make that joke.
Right.
Like, but I will say, and the reason I bring that at least as, if we're going to say Kirk's decision there facilitates a huge portion of it, the Stormtroopers suddenly becoming crap facilitates Luke being able to get to Vader and letting them escape.
Right. Well, and that is definitely like
that's pretty significant, because it does affect a little bit of the stakes.
There's definitely more of that plot armor element to it, where it's tricky when you're like, you want to have the bad guy shooting at them, but you're like,
but I can't have them be.
There's a crap ton of them shooting in their direction, and we can't have them kill the heroes.
Then don't have a crap ton. Or have
cover.
I know,
but you want, yeah.
Like, I get it.
Like,
that would at least be, like, my basis of, like, okay, then let's find them, like, well, then say it's not a whole battalion there. So then you give that, because it's like, I mean, like, you have the scenes with that, Chewie's running away with freaking C-3PO on his back. It's like, you were a golden medal target.
Right. Yeah.
Someone should get shot.
That's pretty valid.
Like, at least, then in Return of the Jedi, Leia gets popped in the arm. At the door, so at least it kind of, it's like, oh no, you can't. Well, stormtroopers can shoot you. It's okay. You can get back. You can, but like I said, it really is the second half of Empire Strikes Back where that starts, because Hoth, they're deadly again. They're still deadly. Like like the stormtroopers are a terrifying force, but then you get that second half, and you're like, oh, they start becoming a little, and it's not too bad because there isn't a lot of them. It's obviously Return of the Jedi. Then you're like, when did the stormtroopers suddenly become crap? And then, you have the fans have to make headcanon. They're like, well, at this point, the Empire spent so much money. Training's not as good. The materials aren't as good. And you're like, that's not said in the movie. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but that's not in the movie.
Yeah.
Anywhere in there. It's like you said, the simple answer is it's plot armor because writers needed something to happen. Like, let's remove all the fluff. Let's remove all the whole full thing on there and say, well, they did it because they wanted to facilitate.
You got to have an action scene, but you can't have them kill.
I want stakes and make them feel like they're in danger, but I also don't want them in danger.
Right. I mean, it's. I mean, it's akin to one of my favorite silly ones is when characters will hide behind a car door and it's getting shot by machine guns.
By like a heavy machine gun.
And you're like, no. I mean, I always laugh because, well,
you know what the
my friends have gone out,
right?
My friends have done that with car doors out in the shooting ranges before, And you're like, yeah. And then it was my other favorite one when Top Gear did it, and they're like, I think it was Jeremy Clarkson, and he was like, will this protect me against the militias? And they're like, no. And he put like 15 phone books into it to try to stop it. He's like, and it still went straight through, and he's like, well, I forget exactly what it was, but it was something ridiculous. He's like, that's not doing nothing. So, but yeah, that is one of those, it's kind of in the same category where you're just going to accept it. It just in Star Wars, they're just like, yeah, we'll just make it not a good shot versus hiding on cover all the time.
Yeah, which I guess in some ways, though, I feel like hiding behind cover makes more sense with a blaster laser than a bullet.
Well, yeah, because in blaster, you'd be like, all the materials seem relatively impervious to blast. Relatively.
Yeah, relatively. Like, but because it just makes more sense. That
every metal is
this
kind
dissipates
of
the heat and damage
stronger
impact of a blaster compared to an actual projectile that's going to have kinetic energy and
well, and also seems like
mass behind it, and
it also seems like that's definitely one of those critiques where it starts to fall into like nitpick, which I'm totally okay with sometimes too. So don't get me wrong in that. It's like a tricky thing where you're like, how far do you want to go down?
It's like I wouldn't like, and not too often would I want to go too far in it because I'm like, But when it does facilitate certain things for the characters to be able to get out of certain situations, then it's like I gotta look at that with a little bit heavier eye than just
right. Well, that's
basic nitpick.
I know.
Like you said, now I can go into plot armor.
We'll wrap up here pretty soon, but that goes into like the one like, and people have tried to like. I mean, the expanded my universe, I think might have expanded on it, but it is one of those like try to like explain it away, and people have tried to explain it away. But obviously, like, if you took lightsabers for what they are, in the sense of what they are, their fighting style would be very different.
Yes.
Because obviously, lightsabers are used more akin to medieval swords. So,
I think the basic style they usually use is the Keto. It's like the one where it's like the Japanese with the bamboo.
Yeah, something.
It's a very natural.
Well, that's more. That was the original one.
Yeah. And then a little bit more like medieval bastard kind of.
But you have some level of like mass to the sword.
Yeah.
Versus a handle.
There wouldn't be.
Where if you did at least again based off just the original movies, based upon what you see in the basic science of it. The lightsaber battle would be more akin to.
I mean, like
it would be comically. Now, granted, I'm not saying it would be good, because it would be. I mean, people made fun of the idea of like, and there's some pretty funny skits on YouTube where it's like, turn my lightsaber off and on, and they're like, that's really annoying, and they're like, and you could put some basic like, oh, it takes a second to recycle your lightsaber when you turn it off. It takes a second to turn it back on. You could put some in canon like. Rules to it.
Even beyond that,
it's funny though. Like it's more of a funny thing than a serious thing. But it would, because you wouldn't really want a massless lightsaber battle, because it would be comical. I think it would come off more of a comical thing than like the stakes.
Because I think if they adopted more of a fencing style, like a true like a very pure fencing style, where it's one tap kind of thing, you know what I mean? Like the actual battles.
Right.
I think that's where you'd have it better, because that's really what you need.
You're standing away from each other.
Like I'm, and I think that's kind of why. Like,
but you just won't get that nice,
Well, it's why Count Dooku's actually fighting style is actually a far more realistic.
But the reality,
if I had a lightsaber, it's like I'm gonna go for your hands,
right,
and your hilt. That's the two things I'm gonna go through. I don't care about this.
Right.
Let me cut off your finger and your hilt in a little quick,
Well, that's like
and I'm done.
That's like the meta though, which is. Yes, that's how in reality lightsabers would be. Actually, if you had real lightsabers, the fighting style would actually, regardless of if they had mass of some level, would be very different, because you don't need to stab somebody.
The thing, like you said, I don't need momentum to cut through you.
You just
my lightsaber touches and it starts cutting.
Versus,
and then too, if you get into the big science of the fact that I think that they say that's like how superheated your body would become from that touch.
Oh,
you would explode almost, like from the point where you were touched.
It
wouldn't be a cauterizing wound.
Right.
It's too super hot for that. Like it would.
Yeah, there's
boil
some stuff. It would be pretty bad for you.
So
on multiple levels, but I think strictly from a cinematic perspective, You want that like lightsaber crash and holding the swords.
You want the what they call the bind and the stuff like that.
Yeah, you
like
want the guys. We know it makes in the sense of from an exterior thing. That makes no sense, but it looks a lot better. It's kind of like the explosions in movies.
Yeah,
where like when a character they blow up something or whatever, and they're this classic walking away and they're looking, or even if they're looking, but they'll be blowing up essentially a big building and they're walking away from it at 20 feet away. And if you've ever seen explosions online or anything that's ever a real life explosion that scale, if you're within like half a mile, you'd probably be dead on some of the scale, or at least not a few hundred meters away. I remember when I went to the Kennedy Space Center, we were doing some filming there, and I don't know if I told you this one, but we were filming there, and we were doing a launch. And we were like, oh, how close can we get? And so they had like, okay, this is as close as we're able to get. And we're like, oh, can we get any closer? Like, not if you don't want to die. Because it's not you would die.
It's the pressure wave, isn't it?
The noise. So it is, yes, pressure.
The sound wave.
The sound wave. I mean, it's the noise, the pressure, that kind of stuff.
It's not the fire and the project. It's not.
You're not going to cook. It would be all those things. It's not because you're going to cook or get burnt.
Yeah, it's because your insides would go.
Yeah, you're going to be liquefied from the sound or whatever version of that, and it's pretty crazy because you're like, oh, I mean, I feel like there's a couple movies out there where they have like a rocket launch, and the characters are within a couple hundred meters of it, and you're like, oh no, you'd be dead.
Yeah,
like, which is crazy.
They just get the typical like, oh, I kind of got pushed over by like the flames, and you're like, no. That's not what happened to you, right?
And again, from a spectacle thing, you're like, oh, if you wanted to live this, yeah, you got to be that rocket's 2 miles away, and you lived. Cool, but that sure doesn't look as cool as the characters 200 meters away, and there's a rocket launching off, or whatever that explosion. Because really, rockets just control explosion.
Or you can watch the other guys when they have that joke when like the tax agency behind them blows up and they have Will Ferrell character. He's like, you can't walk away from explosions like that. He's like, when that stuff blew up, that was total bullcrap. And Mark Wahlberg's like, don't you bad talk. I think he's saying Star Wars. He's like, when the Death Star blew up and they all walked away, whatever it is. But it's like they have that joke because it's like, and they all have blood blisters and everything after it. Like making the joke.
I remember seeing it. I forgot that part of it.
Yeah, because they just had to like, that's such bullcrap. You can't walk away from explosions like that.
But to wrap it up, thank you for watching today.
Yes.
Hope to do more content here. Unfortunately, probably won't get to do as much more with Christopher Shepard here inside of the same space, but we'll bring him back online hopefully here more often, and so hopefully more content from me. Probably hitting a lot more on the anime, because one element that I know I've shared with both of my brothers is that I don't really want to watch stuff that sucks just to critique it. I want to watch stuff that I enjoy. And, here and there you're going to have some stuff that you're like, I got to critique on this. But, if you watch some of our stuff before, you can look back on it. We watched every season, or watched all the episodes of season 1 of Picard, and it was just a dumpster fire. And
it was painful.
I just don't have the time nor the desire to sit through a bunch of crap, because there's just so much crap. Like, there's just so much stuff that's just not good. Now, there's some good stuff out there, don't get me wrong, but I gotta be interested in it. So I want to find things that, it's not to just sit there and go laud praise on things that don't deserve it and be like a shill on it. But it's also like, if it's not good, I'm not gonna waste my time on it. Or if it's like a bad, like a show is just like, we used to watch Doctor Who. I mean, I remember the first 7 seasons, spectacular. I mean, I remember watching the 50th anniversary special, and I literally waited up till midnight so I could get it.
50th or 60th?
50th, because 60 just happened.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
But
yeah.
I remember waiting up to like midnight so I could get a copy of it from the UK and watching that, and I was so excited, and it was a spectacular episode. And now I just don't care.
Yep.
I mean, I watched the first season of the thing, and the writing, I mean, the poor Capaldi, he could have been so good, but the writing started going downhill there, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And so for me, I just don't watch it anymore. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm okay turning it off and going, yep, I'm not going to sit through 12 episodes or whatever their current season counts are, or any of these shows, and go, yep, I'm gonna
It's like
watch
8
it.
for most of these shows now, especially like anything on streaming services. It's like 8 episodes. I don't know why 8 has now become the
Yeah, I think it's because they've just been.
industry
I
standard.
think they're spending so much money on these things nowadays. They just can't
I
afford
guess
it.
that's true, but
I mean,
it's
their
like,
budgets are ridiculous. I mean, we know that.
I mean,
but-
yeah, their budgets are ridiculous, and yet they're not paying for writing.
Right. The writing, not so good. But anyway, that's all for us from today.
And you guys let us know, especially on the side of Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
What you guys might have. Like I said, I think we can probably think of more at the moment. We're a little threadbare on it. Like I said, I think, we have our
Yeah, if you have some,
our main one
some
for
critiques that
Rathacon,
aren't
but
nitpicks and stuff like that. But
yeah, bring some to us, and then that's something that we can go like, ooh, springboard in.
and I don't know.
discuss.
I guess the final part. Did we ever answer our favorites definitively? Like the one we think is better. I think Rathacon for me is probably the better one.
I think for the
we're talking
emotional
just-
payoff, that and the encapsulated full story that Rathacon gives me compared to Empire Strikes Back, I think is probably what we'll put it, because I can watch Rathacon and be good.
Right.
I can watch Empire Strikes Back and be good, but you get to the end of it and Han Solo's left in Carbonite.
It's not a
Everyone's in
complete
a sense
story.
of limbo.
Right.
And it's like, and that's why I
So-
said, like, I love Two Towers, even though that's the second of a trilogy. But even within that, there is kind of an encapsulation of that basic story within that part as
Right.
well. So it's like there's an ending there, and Empire Strikes Back is a fantastic cliffhanger ending.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. All the characters.
And it makes you be like, oh, I need to know what happens next. Like, what the heck is going to happen to Han? Luke just lost a hand.
Yeah.
What's happening to him? Where is he
Well,
going
it's
to be
revealed
after
it
all
was
this?
his father.
And
Yeah.
the reveal of his being his father. So it's like a huge dynamic change
There's so much.
right at the end.
Like I said, we love them both, but yeah, it's a lot of it. And hopefully, the audio sounded good. We are filming in our new little studio space here. This is a bit windy today, some tornado warning. So luckily, nothing's happened, but it's been a little windy. So hopefully, the audio sounded pretty good. It'll be improved here. Today was kind of a dry run, but like I said, we were talking, smoking cigars, enjoying ourselves, and we were talking on this. I'm like, let me set the camera up and record and talk. So thank you guys for watching, and have a wonderful night.